ultimately it's product market fit, right? It's building something that people want enough to pay you a living.
Welcome back to this week's episode of The Executives, the show where we navigate the intricate world of executive leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and personal stories of successful professionals shaping the global business landscape. I'm your host, Majid, and joining us today is Nick. Nick is a seasoned expert in leadership and team development. With years of experience in building high-performance teams, Nick has developed an understanding of what it takes to foster collaboration and drive success. He's passionate about empowering individuals and creating environments where teams can thrive. He is a true serial entrepreneur who has sold 3 startups and now works as the head of Samsung Foods. Hey, and welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Thank you for that introduction. It's great to be here.
So before I ask you to introduce yourself, I saw behind you is drums. So what kind of drummist are you?
Beginner. I've had it there for probably about 2 years. I do play it multiple times a week, but I took one lesson. And since then I've just been kind of like YouTubing it, and I just do it for fun. I'm definitely not in a band or good enough to be in a band, but I love just letting off steam when I'm, feeling a little bit stressed or have a few minutes before meeting.
Maybe if I had known, right, I would have asked you, hey, can you maybe introduce yourself?
do a little intro jingle for your podcast, right?
Exactly. So, what I try to do is I try to justify a lot of experience of a lot of years into 3-4 sentences. So, but would love to understand more from you directly that who exactly is Nick?
I won't go back too far, but I graduated from university, started doing investment banking, realized it wasn't for me because there's not enough creative kind of outlets in that, and started doing startups, basically from about 21. I'm now 38, so that's quite a long time, and have basically built a variety of different ones. I built the most recent and the most famous is Whisk.com, which was a food app that I founded in 2012. Actually presented the idea for it on a UK television show called The Apprentice with Lord Sugar. That kind of got a lot of attention. It was one of the most highly watched shows in the UK. I got to the final and got to pitch the idea for Whisk to kind of a UK television audience. That basically got a lot of interest from investors, from grocery companies, from grocery stores, publishers, recipe publishers, consumer packaged good manufacturers, big food companies basically, who wanted to get involved. We launched the business. We had like 3, 4, 5 people, scaled that, and lots of stories in between that, of course, scaled that to a profitable business in 2019, where we were acquired by Samsung. We had a sort of a mini bidding war among multiple different companies that wanted to buy us. We accepted an acquisition offer from Samsung, then scaled the team further with Samsung, and I now lead that team. So in addition to running Samsung Food and the team within Samsung, I'm also an angel investor. So I've invested in about 30 different tech startups, a variety of deep tech, health tech, general tech startups, mainly in the UK, but some global as well. And love building tech products and love building companies. I love the creative process and the challenge and the reward when you get it right.
Interesting. I remember when we met, right, on the event, we talked about food, and I gave you a name of a restaurant. And the question is, did you have the opportunity to try that?
I live in Birmingham, which is not London.
Oh.
The recommendation you gave me was in London. I haven't. But what I can tell you is that my brother-in-law did go and try that restaurant because he and his girlfriend went to visit that restaurant. So by extension, I have visited it. I haven't, not personally though, because it's in a different city to where I live.
But hopefully they said good stuff about that.
They loved it.
I mean, I've been there. I love that place. It's actually the largest Pakistani buffet I have had. It's even bigger than the buffets I have had in Pakistan. So that's like the largest buffet I've seen. But Today we are talking because I have this really fancy topic. We don't do simple. We do all bling bling, executive bling. So, which is from startup to Korean Conglomerate, selling a company to Samsung and also thriving in the whole global corporate environment. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about this Whisk. The idea is the Whisk. From that I assume, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you walk us through the early days of Whisk? How did you even come up with the idea of Whisk?
Nowadays, sometimes sort of tempted to follow or do follow the saying of, measure twice, cut once. Do lots of research, be quite deliberate about what you want to launch, test it, then go and invest in it, right? But the reality is that's not how I started at all. It was much more haphazard and kind of following guts and I guess just kind of, interest at the time. I was a student. I was cooking the first time away from, I guess, my mother and my home, and realized how difficult it was to the whole cooking process, from grocery shopping to planning what you're going to eat to actually cooking and getting a good result. All of that whole process felt difficult. And at the same time, there was the online grocery stores in the UK were growing quite quickly, and we were leading in the world for online grocery shopping. Right, we were ahead of the US. So it was kind of this moment where the UK was leading in the world. We had these like quite advanced grocery stores compared to the rest of the world, with APIs and with full integrations into sort of you could build an app that was integrated into e-commerce in grocery. So I kind of just started building something, right, with some friends. There was two of us, a guy called Craig and myself. We were both running other companies at the same time, so we hired a few people, part-time contractors, to help us with the things that we couldn't do or didn't want to do ourselves. But we were, so we're a small team, maybe 3 or 4 people. And then the apprentice came along, and I pitched the idea, and then we got funding, and then we grew, and then ultimately what we learned actually was that a lot of the things that we thought we were going to do didn't work out in the way that we wanted to. We basically spent, to kind of compress the story, we spent between 2012 and 2016, spent it trying to build a consumer business, a consumer app, which was the original vision, realized how expensive it is and difficult it is to build a consumer business and to make money on it. It's really hard. So we kind of almost went bankrupt, essentially. We're kind of very, very close to bankruptcy. We flipped all that technology into a B2B platform because we had so many connections to the enterprise space. So platforms we were integrated with, grocery stores and big publishers and big food manufacturers. We had lots of requests from them. Hey, you guys have all this clever technology. Can we use some of it on our own properties, on our own websites? So we kind of basically flipped the whole business from this consumer business into a B2B business, powering other people's services. So that wasn't really our vision originally. It was kind of related. Our vision was to build our own app and our own experience. What we actually ended up doing or pivoting to in 2016 was building a platform that allowed other people to do it. The benefit of that was those other people had audiences already. So we had we were powering the likes of Amazon and Tesco and BBC Good Food and the big brands that you'll have heard of, Food Network, All Recipes. We were actually powering, at the height of it, about 500 million monthly interactions, so 500 million across all these different platforms, other people's platforms. So we were the back-end platform that was powering the sort of smart experience and other people's experience. So that was kind of the solve, if you like. We couldn't build our own audience, so we went and helped other people build their audiences. We ended up powering Samsung and a whole bunch of other appliances and other technology companies as well. But because of that, Samsung, we sort of first started getting to know Samsung probably sort of 2017-ish. And 2 years later, were acquired by them and kind of building a lot more for them, powering much more when it deeply integrated into their appliances as well, and then building consumer apps for them too. So ultimately, I guess still doing the same thing. So the main thing, the thread throughout has been the ultimate experience that we enable is a app in a user's hands that allows them to do things like shopping list and meal planning and recipe cooking easily and in a more joyful way. But the way that we have kind of approached it and delivered the technology has changed quite a lot. It's almost been like separate companies in its different parts of its journey. And that was a lot of discovery, listening to customers, pivoting when you needed to, often needing different skills in the team to do it. Some really painful moments as well, where cutting team size when we didn't have enough money, some really exciting times when we had money and we needed more people and we're growing too fast and couldn't deal with it and had to hire more people. So kind of a whole mix of emotions, and definitely a roller coaster.
That's the whole beauty about a startup, right? The ride is always, it's not a straight line. And I was talking to a startup founder. Now he also sold a startup. He was telling me it's not even a roller coaster. He said it's something random, and he reminded me of the Brownian concept of motion, which is like haphazard movement of atoms. He's like, that's a startup. So one day you're basically sitting and selling something. The other day you're sitting with the developer talking about code.
Yeah, and also like it requires a lot of, I think, perseverance. And you're always told that. You're always told, cockroach mentality, or all these kind of words that are used by authors and thought leaders, perseverance and grit, and kind of words that are used frequently by successful entrepreneurs or investors. But when you're in it, right, in the game yourself, you are the startup. You're not the investor in it, where you've kind of spread your risk across many. You are the person having to persevere and have that grit. We definitely had lots of perseverance and grit, right? So I think one of the reasons why we succeeded was that. There's other reasons too, which we can go into if we have time. But you're always questioning yourself: is this the right thing to have perseverance and grit with, or should I be having perseverance and grit with something else? Like always weeks where you're like massively questioning yourself: am I working on something stupid? And then you need to go into the office every day, or into your digital office if that's what you have nowadays, and exude confidence to your team of like, yes, we're going to win this thing. Come on, everyone, follow me. But inside, you're like, oh, is this really going to work? So yeah, there's lots of that. And then lots of genuine excitement and confidence too in the moments when things are going well. But definitely, I would say it's a roller coaster, emotional roller coaster, financial roller coaster, and probably other roller coasters too.
No, that's true. I mean, it's the same for the podcast, right? It's a product. I started it as just for fun. Let's see, tell people I run a podcast, but little did I know that it would, one, basically blow through the roof. And secondly, I would be interviewing cool people like yourself.
Thank you. It's
See,
very nice to be here.
the whole startups also, right? There are the good things and then there are challenges as well, right? So I'm sure you mentioned that sometimes you don't have money. That's one of the most common problems of startups. But what was like, if I were to ask you, what is the biggest challenge you faced while scaling up Whisk, and how did you basically solve that?
I think ultimately it's product market fit, right? It's building something that people want enough to pay you a living. That is ultimately the biggest challenge, and it's iterating fast helps. Listening to customers a lot helps. There's so how to build a successful product is very, very multifaceted. But the problems if you don't have it, while you don't have it, right, is like having enough money is a big one, as you mentioned. And there were moments where we had none, and we were able to solve it luckily through contracting. We essentially as individuals we contracted ourselves out either as groups or as individuals to be able to bring in enough cash, not from the core startup but from individually, to kind of not be on the streets, if you like. But we also, some of the key things that we did right, I think, was we got good people on the bus, as we hired good people. We had good people in our team. And that's, I think, the one thing that I'm really proud of is like we had great people and we arranged them well so that we were able, if you have good people, a good team, that team is usually able to figure its way through challenges and the problems or the journey of building a good product. And part of what allowed us to do that is we were super early in distributed teams, right? So now it's common with COVID. Since COVID, it's common. We started hiring in a distributed way in 2011. And our first ever person in our team full time was based in Russia, not based with us physically. We had never met the person, and I ended up sponsoring that person's visa, and they became a UK citizen, and that was all through having never met the person, right? Having basically like worked with them online, and that person became our CTO and became essentially my co-founder in the business. And without that person and without people like him, and there were many, we would not have made it where we got to. And part of that was looking not just like geographically close to us at people we could hire, but like opening up positions globally, being able to find really, really good talent at prices that we could afford. In other countries, we're able to hire the top 1-2% of people at a rate that was less than our local rate in Birmingham, UK. And that, when I look back, I do think that was one of the things that we did really, really right, is finding great people within the budget that we could afford. And when I look at competitors of ours at the time, and there were a whole bunch of competitors, and there's always new competitors that come up, and there's always competitors that vanish. And so many arrive and vanish, and in the past arrived and vanished. And they were basically usually based in New York or San Francisco with really high cost bases, hiring people locally, and they would raise like 5 million. We had like no money. And I was like, shit, like this other company's got like $5 million. Like, how are we going to survive? How are we going to win against this? And we did consistently through being pretty frugal, running, being extremely lean, essentially, with how we ran. And ultimately, once we got to profitability, everything became easier, right? So 2017, 2018, we became profitable as a business. And suddenly everything changes, because then you can afford then you're kind of, you're no longer dependent on investment dollars, right? You're basically just running it on the game becomes a lot more fun as well, because now you're making money, and when you're investing money to make more money, not not to kind of with the goal of breaking even or something. So that was kind of I would say a really, really fun time in the journey, was like becoming profitable.
No, that's cool. That's cool, because the challenges, you overcome the challenges, and then now eventually you ended up selling to Samsung. So now let's go back to the day where you actually sold it. I believe it was a signing of a contract, or how was this finalized, the deal?
Yeah, ultimately it's a signing of a contract. The ownership and the control of the business is handed over. It was my identity, essentially, especially because I had pitched it on a TV program, right? Like, everyone knew that this was like this was the thing that I was connected to. So it's kind of in some ways a relief, because the thing that I was connected to so closely in my identity was now kind of solidified or confirmed as like not being a failure, but also kind of weirdly sad, because suddenly someone else owned this thing which I had like built up, and I felt quite emotionally quite attached to, right? And I guess I'm still involved in it. just a kind of a sign of that as well.
That's a sign, right? You're like, it's 2024, so now 6 years since the acquisition?
Yeah, 5 years basically. Yeah.
5 years. So 5 years you're still there. That means you really love the whole mission. But my question is more towards, like, after you sign the contract, that you realize that it's like, deal is done. So what did you do? Did you celebrate, or were you like, did you just go home and you were like, oh, so this is what the last 7-8 years has done?
Yeah, I didn't like do anything quick and rash, to be honest. Like, I didn't go and have a huge party or anything. I imagine, I can't remember exactly. I imagine I probably went out for a nice meal and probably went out for some drinks with the team or something, but nothing like hugely. I do remember, because to be honest, it went pretty quick into the integration phase, which I took pretty seriously, because like I didn't have any like financial need to take it seriously, because it was a cash deal. I was paid cash. There was, I did have to stay at Samsung for 3 years, but not achieve anything in particular, right? So like I was bound legally to stay for 3 years, which I am now 5 years in, right? So I overstayed that. Well, I am currently overstaying it massively because of lots of good reasons, because I really like what we're doing there. I took it seriously because like I felt an obligation, right? I'd sold this company to this large enterprise who had trusted me in the product to like deliver something. Also, the reasons we sold to Samsung were not only cash. Obviously, cash is an important part, and like the fact that team and investors and myself and others get a financial outcome. That's obviously a big thing, right? But there was also, Samsung had this vision as well, where they wanted to build this like service, which ultimately we have realized now with Samsung Food, but like build this service that was distributed across hardware they had. And I thought that was really exciting, the ability to take what we had built as a foundation and now bring it to so many more people through one of the biggest brands of products in people's homes. And then the other reason that I was really excited by it was the team, because Samsung had this team called Samsung Next. It's like a product team in San Francisco where the person I would report to was a guy called Travis, and the team that he had hired. They had a really like talented, experienced team. Travis was ex-head of product for Uber. His team were like, ex-head of design for Airbnb and like big sort of tech startups, right? And I basically got to work really closely with that team to integrate this into Samsung and then to kind of build the next vision for the future of where we were going to go with this. So that was like massively motivating for me too, right? It was like the ability to learn from people that I really respected who had a lot of experience, way more experience than me. So like, it wasn't like, for me, it was like, oh, great, mission finished. In some ways, it was like, yes, mission 1 finished, but mission 2 starts immediately. And you're kind of straight back into it. I do remember I had to do a workshop in San Francisco the week after closing, and I remember on the way to San Francisco, my wife and I flew to Mexico, and I think we had like, I don't know, a few days in Mexico on the beach, and we kind of celebrated together. And I remember both our laptops got stolen. Which was really frustrating. So I remember like I was on the plane in San Francisco having to meet my new boss and all of his team. I had no laptop, nothing. I went on like, I think it was TaskRabbit or something. You could order Apple Macs. So by the time I got into my hotel, my Apple Mac had arrived and my hotel had all the data loaded onto it. And I literally just arrived, took it, went straight to the meeting, straight back in with it was, and then it was straight into integration, right? Straight into integrating into Samsung. And then the travel schedule was really heavy as well. They basically, I was in San Francisco for about a week every 3 weeks, or at least a week a month. And then I was in Korea for, a week every 2 months. And then I was we had an office in Tel Aviv, and an office in Germany, and other offices. I was in the other offices. So I was out of the country for at least 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks in the month. And like, that was like initially exciting for like maybe the first 2-3 months. And then suddenly it was like, wow, that is such an impact on my personal life. Like, this is really difficult. And I struggled. Like, I found it hard. But then COVID came and canceled all travel. And that was also kind of like another moment where it's like, it's almost like a relief from the intense travel in some ways. But I'm super grateful for the people I got to work with. And I think that's really what it's been throughout. The one takeaway I have is like, grateful for the people I was able to hire and bring on board and who helped me build everything we've built. And then grateful for the people I've got to work with who I can learn from. And still, like, I have lots of, everyone in the team has a reason for being there, right? They're smarter than me in the area that they're responsible for. And that is, you can learn, working with smart people is enjoyable.
Cool. No, that's very interesting. But when you were giving up Whisk to Samsung, right, as Samsung Foods, so did you have actually some concerns? But because from what I heard so far, it seemed that you were really going to enjoy the people you would work with. But there is also on the subconscious of a person, right, that you build, like, it's your own baby. You grew it, you built it. And did you have any concerns basically about the whole post acquisition or maintaining control, or how is it now? I mean, at the end of the day, you are still pushing the vision of Samsung Foods, right?
Yeah, I think, of course, I had concerns. And there've been many times in the journey where I found it very frustrating that I don't have full control anymore. I ultimately report to, other people. Other people own the business. It's theirs. But I guess I kind of see myself as a steward of the business on their behalf, right? My role is no longer owning it or doing it for me. I'm doing it on their behalf. So the way I do it is I consider what is in their interest for this business, for this product to do and be, and do my best to achieve that. And I think that's really important to kind of like understand, what do they want? Not necessarily what do I want, what do they want? And I think that's also a lot of what I do in coaching my teams is like, think about what what Samsung wants in this. Like, what's the best thing for Samsung? What's in the interest of that? What do I believe? What do we believe is in their best interest? And then obviously sometimes that misaligns with what a different stakeholder thinks is in their best interest, right? Because it's such a large enterprise. There are thousands of teams. So like, no one's always going to agree 100%. But what I try and fight for is not what's in my personal interest, but what's in the interest of the shareholders, Samsung. And I don't know, like ultimately it's the mission, I think, that is motivating. The mission is, when it comes to food, there's two parts of the mission that, or kind of problems in the world that I find very motivating. One of them is health. 40% of the world is overweight. Bad diet, depending which data you look at, some people say is the leading cause of death, because if you have bad diet, you get so many other illnesses that kind of link to that. And so like, if you can help people eat better, the impact we can have on the world is huge. And then waste food is also crazily high. Like we waste not quite half, but nearing, running up to near half of the food we produce. I think it's about 38% or something like that. So like, again, like, wow, like huge, like amount of waste, right? And it has a really bad impact for the environment, a bad impact on people's lives. So that those missions, solving those problems is like motivating. And like, it's almost like, I believe there's almost like no better person that can fix it than these really, really big companies. If they build the right app that is then put in people's hands to help them like achieve their goals. So that is like, I find that really motivating, and I wouldn't be able to do that on my own. I have to do that on behalf of a big company like that. I think that's the most effective way of getting there. So I find the mission really motivating. I guess that's probably why I'm still here at the company and still motivated, because like, I want to make that work. I want to achieve that as a product for the world, for me, for my family, and for others. And so like, do I feel frustrated sometimes? Of course, like there are many moments where I feel frustrated, but I can usually get over that personally, because I know that the ultimate thing we're working to is important to me, and the current setup is a very good way of getting there.
I mean, food wastage is a serious problem. Coming back towards more of this, like culture change also between, you're based in UK, you build a startup in UK, and then you suddenly get acquired by a Korean startup. So how was the transition like to basically running your own startup and then now working for a Korean conglomerate? Because Korean people are extremely hardworking people, like extremely hardworking.
Yeah, very, very hardworking, and like, so I think it's such an interesting thing, because we were actually acquired by an American subsidiary of Samsung, right? So like the innovation subsidiary, if you like, who do the M&A deals out of San Francisco. And you've got these, like, we were already a distributed team, so we already had people in America, we had people in Europe, we had people in the UK, but we hadn't kind of got to the stage where we had like a big West Coast team, a Korean team, and suddenly we went from like a European time zone and cultural differences team, European including like Eastern Europe and like Russia in this, and to one that was like, we were literally distributed almost equally, not quite equally, but almost like -8 GMT to +8 GMT, Americans, British people, Russian people, Korean people, all trying to work, all with very different. If you mapped it out on some kind of map, we in the kind of in the extreme, some of them in the extreme kind of quadrants of cultural differences. Super interesting. And like, how do you manage that, right? So like, cultural values of a team become super, super important. But specifically within Korean culture, like there is, a difference between like the Western culture, I think, is more kind of individual focused, whereas like Korean is more collective sort of thinking, where like, conformity to a group, thinking as like a group, it is much more important. Whereas in the Western kind of culture, you're encouraged to think differently, and it's rewarded to think differently and speak out contrarian views and things like that, right? Whereas in Korea, that would also be valued, but behind the scenes, not in front of the group, right? You would kind of, you'd do a lot of that kind of alignment behind the scenes. And of course, there's other things in Korean culture, which, especially in how Samsung and big Korean companies do things, like the management style is very top down in decision making. There's kind of more loyalty towards what the leader says. Whereas again, in Western culture, it's much more normal to kind of question some of those things, right? Well, first of all, we did a whole bunch of cultural training, right, to train our team on how to work with Korean enterprises and Korean people in a way that's really productive. I think we had an advantage in that we already had been a globally distributed team. So we understood the importance of working with different cultures and different people from all over the world and how to work in time zones and all of that stuff. Ultimately, it comes down to, I think empathy of like understanding how the other person thinks and what the other person cares for. And, the people are very smart and have good intentions. And this is true across any cultural kind of barrier. Usually the people across the other side of the barrier have got good intentions and are smart, not making stupid decisions or whatever it is, right? But like, if you don't take the time to understand their position, you can fall into this trap of thinking, oh, they don't understand. They're trying to be deliberately difficult or cut me out of something, but actually, when you take a step back and you try and like have empathy or kind of, and understand why the person is, or what their context is, and take time to kind of listen to the other side and learn, often you understand that actually you can work very well together. So I would say lots of learnings. I love Korea, and I love working in Korea. I love traveling over there. I love working with the Korean teams. But it is sometimes, and I think I'm actually relatively good at it too. Like, I've done it now for quite a long time, since 2017. So like, what is that, 7 years, right? But I noticed that with new team members, especially when they come into the team, often I do have to take them through some kind of little bit of like Korean culture basics to kind of like go, hey, this is like, it's going to be different working with this other culture. And that's not just Korean culture, by the way. That's like, someone working with people from a Russian culture or from an American culture or German culture. Like, cultures are different, and getting people to work effectively across cultures takes time and investment. But when you get it right, or when you invest the time to get it right, the outcomes can be really, really rewarding and good, productive. So we're very, I think it's something to kind of like, highly recommended. The key thing, I think, is just invest the time to learn and put mental energy into making it work, and be aware that there are differences. And usually, in 99% of the cases, the intent of the other side is good. It's not bad. It's just we are tempted to believe that others are trying to frustrate our progress.
This is something brilliant. It's a little off topic, but the whole top down, bottom up, like approach in leadership, like. I'm always having this discussion with friends also, and then that how do you make sure, like, at the end of the day, if you're an employee in the company, right, you cannot dictate where the company goes. And if you're on an IC level, not even like an executive C level, you cannot say where the company's headed. You might think that I want to drive the bus to New York, for example, but if the management is not aligned together, that hey, this is where we need to head as an organization, that hey, our end goal is we have to go to Seoul. So if the bus driver of one product is driving and happily ends up in New York, the other bus driver ends up in, I don't know what, Lahore from Pakistan, maybe the other one ends up in Dubai. So the problem then becomes, is it really that we need to have a bottom up approach, or at least have something on the vision, mission? For example, you are very clear with the mission, right, of Samsung Food, for example. You're super clear. You explained it, that what is the goal, like to bring the idea of Whisk into the hardware side as well, to a bigger audience, to more partners, and so on. So I think there is an essential need of having those, right, from an organizational perspective. I mean, shareholders might not pitch in that, hey, this is what you should do, but they would like to see, right, that the C level or the directors or the heads, or VPs actually are aligned together. Or am I wrong here?
No, absolutely. I think there's the advantage of a tops-down culture is that you get strong alignment, because the alignment from the top is the direction, and speed. Right, when the top wants to do something, there's no questioning. There is some questioning, of course. There's less questioning from the ranks below, so you can move quickly. Right. I think people compare it to kind of sometimes to a military command, right? Like, this is where we're going, go, and then everyone goes. Whereas, there's definitely a challenge sometimes in some Western companies that I have worked with or for, where leadership says we're going this direction, and everyone goes, well, should we really? Actually, I think this is the right, and actually there's massive benefits to that too, right? So like you get the direction, maybe you do end up going in a different direction because you get inputs from really, really smart people. But I think you have to, so pros and cons, I would say. And I think culturally, people in Western sort of countries are used to Western management styles and leadership styles. And yes, some Korean companies' styles are different to that, right? But it's not necessarily worse, right? And in some ways it's better. In some cases, there are pros and cons, basically, right? So like I had always, previous to Samsung, and I still do, I guess, right? Actually, like run, bottoms up sort of styles, not sort of tops down styles, right? But I can definitely see the big advantages in tops down too. Like I don't think one is like, I think they're different styles, and they work in different ways. And I think there's some really, really impressive things that Samsung has been able to do. If you look at their results, which have been enabled by the way that they work. And I think it's important to remember as well, especially when you're kind of in the innovation and kind of teams in these big companies, right? Is like, where's the money coming from to pay your salary? And it's coming from the core of the business, which is run in this way. So like, I think there's lots of advantages and then lots of disadvantages, and there's no necessarily right and wrong way. And I think you have to be able to look at it from everyone's perspective, I guess, right? Rather than with your own biases. My bias before Samsung was also bottoms up is the way to go, because like that's what I had been taught in culture and in business school, right? But not necessarily only in business. They also teach you tops down, right? It's an interesting balance. Even like an interesting balance, I think, recently and actually in media. Like I think the idea of tops down and kind of like it has become a little bit more popular, right? I would say in the last couple of years. That's my impression.
The whole point behind bottoms up or tops down, is I say that, look, there is a hierarchy. So let's say there is C-level, a bunch of C-level people, then there is, let's say, directors, then there is someone else, head of. So what I feel the job of director is to get the vision and then bring it to their team, So it essentially becomes a mix of both approaches. So then the people are able to connect as well, because I really would like to connect with the goal of the company that I work for. If I cannot work for it, like if I cannot even connect with the whole goal and I'm not excited for the goal, then I would be like, oh shit, man, I have to work for them again, like basically, right? That I have to get up again. I mean, it pays my bills, but I wouldn't be happy. But if on the other side, if I know that that's the goal I'm working for and that's my personal goal as well, it connects directly or indirectly to that goal of the company, then it becomes more easier for me, right, as a person. And I would enjoy more, because I would rather have people in my team. Or also, when I had my startup last year, I was like, I would prefer that you guys wake up in the morning and you go like, oh yes, we are going to work with Majid, not oh shit, we are going to work with Majid, because there's a big difference. Then the productivity is different, right? So, and because you were also partly mentioned now, innovation, right? And we have this perception always when you talk to people who are working in startups, have this imagination, so to say, that corporates are not innovative. And Samsung is an example. Actually, I remember I used it as an example in one of my episodes before, that it started as a grocery delivery service in 1930s, right? I mean, and now it has evolved to one of the largest conglomerates. You name it. I know they make the TVs, microwaves, mobile phones, and probably will start making robots as well. And now look, they are also in the food market. I mean, I don't know the whole portfolio landscape of Samsung, so I believe that Samsung is innovative. So how do you see that corporates actually innovate? Like, how does Samsung innovate, for example, which may be in sort of different in process to a startup?
I think corporates look for a lot more, and it's not like Samsung specifically, but just generally corporates look for more evidence before going into a venture, right? So it's a lot more research before committing, because I think the cost of getting it wrong is much higher for a corporate, right? The cost of doing business is higher, and also the the risk of getting things wrong is higher because you've got a brand image that might be damaged by a product that is faulty or is not wanted or confuses the brand message when there's too many random products out that are not successful, right? There's also legal risk of like get something wrong at Samsung or in a big entity. There is now a big entity to sue, right? Because you can go to a big company and sue them, whereas a small startup getting something wrong is like, well, if you sue them, they probably can't afford to pay any damages, and therefore, what's the point in suing them? So you can kind of fly under the radar. So like the risk for enterprises in innovation is much higher. So they therefore do more research, more due diligence in things, and therefore move more slowly. And this kind of comes back to actually kind of I don't think it's any different to the personal challenge that we spoke about right at the beginning of this with like measure twice, cut once, right? In an enterprise, you do measure twice or three times, then cut once. In a startup, the way I started my startup was not measuring twice, cutting once. It was cut, remeasure, cut, remeasure, cut, remeasure, cut. And like, what's right? Like the challenge with them, if you measure too much, is that you don't ever cut. You spend your whole time measuring, and by the time you finish measuring, other people have cut too, and have got there already, right? Which is why you see big enterprises also sometimes acquire smaller companies that are able to move faster without all the measurement and are able to kind of like find and kind of find their way and then prove out some success, and then the corporates can buy it and then scale it. And I think that's actually that's probably quite a like healthy kind of like space to be in, where smaller companies can innovate heavily and big companies can buy them. But that's not to say that big companies don't innovate. They can innovate on different things as well. I think like there are certain opportunities that I think big companies are uniquely positioned to innovate around, right? For example, LLMs, right? Like the most of the successful ones, not true entirely, but most of the successful ones are by either big companies, enterprises, or by people who've been funded to have enough money similar to the enterprise, right? So like huge amounts of funding. So like it's very hard to build a great new LLM model unless you have a lot of money. And so that's can you or I, can Majid or Nick go along and build an LLM next week? I think we'd find it very hard without the money, without the big bucks, right? So those opportunities, and that's one area. I think some of the stuff in health is also an opportunity actually where big companies are uniquely positioned because you need, to build massive, we need a lot of money and you need a lot of distribution and you need a lot of power in the space, with partners and stuff to be able to build. So like there are things that enterprises are uniquely positioned to innovate against. And then of course there's the other part of innovation, which is like evolutions of products. Samsung recently launched the Ring, right? This ring here is a digital ring which measures my vitals and connects it to my Samsung phone and tracks my sleep and my activity and things like that. So like again, it would be very hard for you or I individually to go and launch a smart ring like this, right? Whereas for Samsung, when they launch it, they get lots of press coverage. You can buy it in the main retailers. Things that you or I building our own ring company would not be able to take for granted at all, right? So like there's a lot of things that come with the scale, distribution scale, money scale, brand value, and like brand equity that these enterprises have that positions enterprises uniquely to be able to do well in those. But then there's also stuff where actually enterprises are probably not perfectly positioned to innovate on, and maybe that's the green open area for startups to go and explore, win at, and then either build a big listed company themselves or sell out to the big corporates, like I did.
No, interesting. I mean, the whole acquisition is it's a complicated process, right? I mean, running a startup is different. You set up things, and I mean, you're looking for people who are, like you mentioned as well, problem solvers. They see a challenge, they solve it, move on to the next one, keep building it. But now, in the process of basically building the startup and then selling it, what were some of the biggest lessons that actually learned that you were like, oh, or wow, there are always things, right, where you're like, okay, that's new.
There's a lot of different things related to different topics. right? So like some that kind of obvious ones are around product because they're written about all the time. So, things around product innovation or product market fit, things like try and find a customer that's willing to pay you. That was something that was like, we were forced to do when we ran out of money. We had no money left. We could only do things people would pay for, basically. And therefore we only did things that people paid for, not because we wanted to, because we were forced to. And then we ended up building a bunch of stuff that was really valuable. A lot of people wanted to pay for. We were able to find the stuff that was like, build once, sell to many, rather than build for each individual, right? So you don't want to become an agency, if you possibly, unless that's what you want as a lifestyle business. But if you want like a scalable large business, you have to something you can replicate, as in build once, sell to many. So there's lessons like that, but that's been written about a lot. It's not that unique. The things that I think are a bit more unique to our story that I learned are things like with M&A. I get questions quite often, like how do I get my company sold? And often usually I get this question actually from people who haven't got product market fit yet. They're not successful yet as a business, and they now want to find an acquirer. And the reality is, in my experience, and this might not be, I think it's relatively like universal, but it might be just my experience. People buy you if they have integrated with you already, like they need you as part of their of what they're trying to build, or you are highly profitable and they want to buy your revenue, essentially, right? And there's other things too, like they want to buy your revenue and they think they can get for a multiple of your revenue, but they believe they can sell it to a lot more customers and therefore increase your revenue and the synergies and all that stuff. And sure, those are all important factors, but ultimately, either you are profitable and someone's buying a profitable business. If you're not profitable, then they're buying you for like some technology that's critical to what they're trying to do and they can't build it themselves. And for us, it's a bit of both. Like we were profitable, but Samsung didn't care about money buying a profitable business. Like they have so many profitable revenue lines that wasn't their goal. They bought us because we had a technology layer they wanted to use across many of their different devices. They knew they could leverage us a lot given the scale they had on devices. And they wanted all the integrations that we had with all these different partners because they wanted to basically build this like their own experience that integrated with the rest of the world's ecosystem too. So they were kind of ideally positioned for us because they wanted basically all of what we had built, not like a portion of it, right? And they kind of wanted the business and then also to leverage it and take it further. And that was also motivating for us. There's like this, I think people sometimes are under illusion that there's big companies wanting to buy small startups for no apparent reason, for like without like really, really crystal clear, obvious reasons. And it doesn't exist. Buying a company is really hard in a big company because you have to get sign off from so many people, including all of your other divisions, usually someone very, very senior, like the CEO or someone very high up, the financing team, the legal team. It costs a lot of money. It's very hard to buy a company. So there's always this equation of like, is it easier to build my own company, or is it as in internally in the company and build this product myself and copy it? Or how much will that cost me? Or is it easier to go and buy this product that's out there and this team? And only when that equation makes sense do you get the acquisition, right? So that's one thing I definitely learned. I learned a lot about talent. I think, especially on reflection, right? How important good talent is. Like when I look back at our journey, the times that I regret, the things that I regret are hiring people that were sub perfect, like not perfect. They were good, but not perfect. And then you kind of like suffer from like, the team is not as good as it possibly could be for the years that those individuals are there, because like, and perfect fit people are hard to find, and it takes time and it takes patience. And often in the hiring process, you run out of patience and you go, well, I've looked for a few months, couldn't find anybody better. Or I've done 10 interviews, couldn't find anyone better. I'm going to just go with this person. This is the best of the 10 people I interviewed, right? And actually, if your gut does not tell you this is the right person, I would really encourage people to like stick with the interview process, do another round. Don't fill it with someone that is not optimal, that doesn't feel like the right fit for your team, for what you need. Because long term, the real compounding effects of great fit people are great, like really valuable. And so that's another lesson, I think, is like hire great people. And for me, distributed teams allowed me to do that. But that's really, really important. There's a whole bunch more, but I'll try to keep my answers to like non half hour responses, Majid. Otherwise you'll tell me off later.
Maybe we should do like a series, like sitting down with Nick. But because the thing is, it's very common that when like startup founders, they start a company and you talk to them, what's your goal? Yeah, exit IPO. I mean, even if you want to do IPO requirements are so much. Like it's not like you go to the grocery store and buy a bag of tomatoes or potatoes. It's much more complex. There's a whole due diligence process that the stock exchange does on you. That you're not basically involved in any kind of activities, and they have to make sure that you're the right company to be listed on the stock exchange, because at the end of the day, their stock exchange also gets affected by you, by the business, right? And the second place is like exit. Super common. I've heard it so many times. I'm like, dude, why would someone buy? Like, give me a reason. Like, if that's your goal, then why don't you just build something that is like, or why don't you just work for them directly? Like,
everyone wants to get rich, right? That's basically it. People want to build something because they want to get rich. And like, I think it's okay to have that as a motivation, but not as the primary one. Like, I think it's okay, that doesn't mean you can't, but like, I think you have to build a product that is really good, and a business that is really good, like that is making money or doing something valuable and doing something important. And then all those things that you might want, like exits and money and come to you. Like, they come to you because there are many things out there looking for those things. They're looking for the right fit, and once you get, is amazing to me. I spent years trying to get enough investment, and then suddenly stopped looking, started focusing on making money and being profitable, and we became profitable and started growing. And suddenly all these people started coming to me and going, hey, can we buy you? Hey, can we invest in you? Hey, can we? I'm like, wow, like what happened? The difference was like, we had built something people wanted. Right? And like, it's almost like, it's not counterintuitive. It's very common sense, but it feels kind of like, once you've been there, you can suddenly realize that the mistake you were making. So yeah, build something people want, product market fit. But it's an easy word to say and extremely hard to do, because you're also competing against everyone else in the world who's also trying to get product market fit, often in the same category or the same product as you are.
No, true. I mean, that can be another half an hour discussion, right? No, all good. So, but because I just noticed we're also coming more towards the end, right? So, what's next for you? Are you planning to launch some new ventures, or maybe like, or just the plan is scaling Samsung Food and just keep investing into more startups, or something like in the bucket?
You never know when, sometimes it's a game of musical chairs, and you never know when, if when the music stops, whether you'll have a chair or not, right? So who knows what happens to me? But as I am today, I am happy and enjoying building Samsung Food, because I really believe in the mission and vision, and actually also because I really like the team. It's a team that I have, many people, the retention on our team is like really high. We have like many people who have been with the business for 5-10 years. They're people that I have hired, or we have hired, and we have kept, right, and incentivized to stay, who are great at what they do and really enjoying working with them. And I love working with a really good team. So I love the mission. I love the team. I think the opportunity to work in, build it across Samsung is big. So that is all like really motivating. I do stuff on the side. I invest in startups. I've built a few kind of prototypes of different businesses on the side as well. Maybe one day one of those will take off and become like the next big thing. Who knows? But like, I think I enjoy. It's almost like building stuff is also what I do for fun, right? It's not just what I do for work. In my free time, I also enjoy the same stuff that I do in work, which is building what I think is cool, useful tools and stuff, right? There's a few of those that I've like, tried and played with and enjoy that process, and also like keeping close to the latest technology and how to do it, which I think is healthy for my role in Samsung Food as well. So yes, I do have a bunch of cool things that I do on the side and for fun, but ultimately I'm definitely very hopeful that we can achieve what we're trying to do at Samsung Food in a bigger and bigger way every single year. Because if we do, we can help the world be healthier and help the world save more wasted food. And I think that is, if I can do that at the Samsung scale, super, super motivating, important. So let's see, right? You might talk, maybe I'll get fired in 6 months. Who knows? I haven't got any reason to believe that will happen, but you never know. Like, I might not be here forever. Or an idea I have will take off and I'll be building something else in 6 months. Who knows? But right now I have no plans to depart.
No, cool. I can relate to that. I use food as an example to always explain to my friends that there are two things you cannot never know. So one is they don't look at the color of the biryani to know how spicy it is. So because I have had biryani which looked like boiled rice, but it basically burned my entire throat. It was that spicy. And then I've had red colored biryani, which was not spicy at all. It was bland basically for me. So, and the second thing is you cannot say what you would be doing in the next 6 months. Maybe you made plans, but they can change. They can always change. But with that, I would like to say thank you so much, Nick, for actually taking the time. And it was a super fun conversation. And would love to say that if there is anything as a closing remark that you would like to share with our listeners.
You didn't warn me about this question. That's such an interesting. What are the closing remarks? I would say, try and. I think the biggest thing I'd probably say is I think we're in one of the most exciting technology moments for a long time with AI. There are so many problems in the world that we can fix in ways that we couldn't fix 2 years ago. That we can, and these AI APIs, these LLMs, are basically free. Like, yes, they're not actually free, but they're so cheap comparative to the value they create. Like, per API call, so cheap and so impressive. I think this is an amazing moment in the world to look at problems around us and think about how technology can solve them. And I think it's a unique moment. And I hope you have lots of product people listening to this. If there are people out there who have some capacity and time to try and solve problems, I would encourage people to relook at problems that look at old problems and new problems, and try and help us be better as a human race and as a world with all this cool stuff we can build.
Cool. Thank you so much, Nick, again. I would mention your LinkedIn, and also if there's a link for Samsung Food in the description of the video. And it was really fun. So to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Executives this week. If you found this episode valuable or useless, do let me know. And don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network. Until next time, this is Majid signing off.